Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start with the EU, which has rebuked Washington's attempt to legitimize the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, saying all settlements in Palestinian territory are illegal. In a statement, EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said these settlements erodes the prospect of lasting peace. Mogherini called on Israel to end all settlement activity in line with its obligations as an occupying power. Earlier, the US backed Israel over Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank, reversing its 40-year-old policy. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo argued the buildings are consistent with international law. He said the Trump administration will no longer abide by a legal opinion from 1978.
The Trump administration is reversing the Obama administration's approach towards Israeli settlements. U.S. public statements on settlement activities in the West Bank have been inconsistent over decades.
The move was immediately slammed by the Palestinians and the rights groups. A spokesman for the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, said the U.S. move contradicts international law. Meanwhile, the United States says it will impose sanctions on Egypt if it goes ahead with the purchase of Russian warplanes. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs R. Clark Cooper said the deal risks Egypt's future military acquisitions. Cooper said using the Russian Su-35 could pose a threat to Egypt's ability to operate jointly with the U.S. and other NATO countries. Earlier this year, Egypt signed a $2 billion agreement with Russia to buy more than 20 Su-35 fighter jets. Washington can impose sanctions under its Countering America's Adversaries through Sanctions Act that targets the purchase of military equipment from Russia. In another development, the United States has threatened to impose sanctions on Iraqi officials involved in the killing of anti-government protesters. Speaking in Washington, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. will not tolerate the killing and oppression of Iraqi people. Pompeo said America's support to Iraqi protesters and urged President Mahmoud Abbas to protect his citizens' human rights. He said Washington is watching events very closely. U.S. lawmakers are pushing the government to support regulations making it harder to sell sophisticated technology to China's military. Top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer and Republican Senator Tom Cotton have written to Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. In their letter, they press Ross to act speedily to ensure Washington isn't helping strengthen China's armed forces. Schumer and Cotton say China is aiming to acquire American technology with dual military and civilian use. Under an act passed in 2018, the Commerce Department has been must draft regulations limiting the export of cutting-edge technology to Beijing. The U.S. says it will end a sanctions waiver for Iran's Fordo nuclear facility next month. Last week, Tehran announced it has resumed uranium enrichment at the site, pointing to non-compliance by the signatories of the 2015 nuclear deal. Speaking at a press briefing, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said there is no legitimate reason for Iran to resume enrichment at Fordo. He said Iran should not be allowed to enrich uranium at any level, and it must immediately reverse its activity at the facility. Pakistan's Army Chief General Bajwa has discussed regional security with his Iranian counterpart, Major General Mohammad Hussain. General Bajwa arrived in Tehran on Monday on an official visit. In a statement, the Pakistan Army said issues related to border management and efforts for peace and stability in the region were also discussed. Meanwhile, Iranian state media reported that the two sides discussed the prospects of expansion of defense cooperation between the two countries. It further said border trade exchange and convergence among the two countries was also on the agenda of the talks. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi urges the UN Security Council to address the worsening situation in occupied Kashmir.
In a letter, Qureshi said provocative statements from the Indian leadership are a threat to regional peace. Qureshi said Pakistan rejects the bifurcation of occupied Kashmir into two union territories. Meanwhile, Pakistan briefs UK's Council for Human Rights and Religious Freedom about rights violations in the occupied valley. The foreign minister highlighted ongoing atrocities by the Indian troops in the occupied valley. He said 8 million people have been locked up since India stripped the regions of its autonomy and imposed a curfew. The continuous lockdown has resulted in a severe shortage of food and medicine in the valley.
Pakistan will host the 8th meeting of the Istanbul Process next year with a focus on tackling growing Islamophobia and discrimination. Minister of Education Shafkat Mahmood made this announcement at the 7th Process meeting in The Hague, Netherlands. 14 countries will participate in the dialogue. In a speech, Shafkat spoke of an alarming rise in Islamophobia and hate crimes. He also expressed deep concern over heightening systematic discrimination and state violence against Muslims in India. Shafkat called out the double standards of the so-called flag bearers of human rights in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has left the country to seek medical treatment in the United Kingdom. He left after Lahore High Court allowed him to travel abroad for 2 months for treatment in London. The former Prime Minister left on Qatar Airways air ambulance along with his personal doctor and staff. Nawaz Sharif was disqualified by the Supreme Court in April 2017 and sent to jail on corruption charges. For the last 1 month, he was under intensive care after the level of platelets in his blood kept on fluctuating. The Saudi-led coalition is accusing Yemen's Houthi rebels of hijacking a vessel towing a South Korean drill rig out of the Red Sea. Coalition spokesman Colonel Turki al-Maliki said the vessel was seized late on Sunday. He did not say how many crew members were on the boat. In the meantime, Houthi rebels have confirmed the vessel's seizure. A Houthi official said the vessel will be released if it is proven to belong to South Korea. He said the crew is being treated well. Yemen's Prime Minister Ma'in Abdul Malik Said has returned to the southern city of Aden under a peace deal with southern separatists. The separatists expelled the government from its provisional capital in August. The SDC and the government signed a power-sharing deal in Riyadh on November the 5th under Saudi mediation. The deal stipulates the formation of a new 24-member cabinet with equal representation for southerners, including the SDC. Yemen's President Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi has lived in Riyadh since Sana'a fell to the Houthis. In Mali, 24 soldiers and 17 militants have been killed during clashes in the northeastern town of Tabankot. Mali's military says a convoy was attacked during an ongoing joint operation with forces from Niger. It said 29 people were injured in the raid, while 100 suspects were detained. Mali's army has now lost 100 soldiers in 2 militant attacks in this month. The border regions of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have seen repeated clashes with militant groups. Mali has struggled to contain the militant insurgency despite help from African neighbors, the United Nations, and France. It's a time for a short break, but coming up next in the Bulletin. Seven million children held in prisons worldwide. And Indonesian workshop turns waste into decorations. Welcome back. South Korea and the US have failed to reach an agreement on defense cost sharing in the latest round of negotiations. The meeting was held to renew the special measures agreement, which expires next month. South Korea's foreign ministry says Washington's demand for a drastic increase in defense costs is not acceptable. Seoul said it is willing to pay its fair share to strengthen the South Korea-US alliance. The current SMA agreement stands at $870 million a year. Under the SMA, Seoul has shared the cost of almost 30,000 troops stationed in the country since 1991. 15 people have been killed and 9 others injured in a coal mine explosion in China's northern Shaanxi province. Officials say blast trapped 35 miners inside the mine in Pingyao County. State media says 11 miners managed to escape the pit. It said the injured are in a stable condition and an investigation to find the cause of the explosion is underway. It said poor safety measures led to the fatal incident. In the United States, 3 people have been killed in a shooting at the Walmart store in Oklahoma. Police said 2 men and a woman died in the incident. They said the suspect was among the dead. Walmart said in the wake of the shootings, it will limit sales of guns and ammunition. This is the second shooting in the U.S. in as many days after 4 people were shot dead in California. In Australia, Sydney has been shrouded in a dangerous haze as scores of bushfires rage across the region. Strong overnight winds brought smoke from fires inland, pushing the air quality to beyond hazardous levels. Part of the city recorded pollution levels 8 times higher than the national benchmark. Locals described hazy skies and the stench of smoke in their homes. More than 110 fires are currently burning across Australia's east, with dozens of blazes still uncontained. 6 people have been killed and hundreds of homes destroyed in bushfires across New South Wales and Queensland since September. Health officials are advising people to stay indoors and avoid strenuous activity.
All we can do is encourage people to be vigilant, to take whatever precautions they can, avoid the exposure. Don't exercise, which puts extra pressure on your lungs on a day like today when they're already under strain.
A UN report says over 7 million children are being held in prisons or in police custody around the world, but the United States has the highest rate of children in detention in violation of international law. Find the details in this report.
As the migrant crisis at the US-Mexico border surges, it seems the US is failing to protect the migrant children in its care. UN researchers say more children were detained away from their parents in the United States this year than in any other country on earth.
In terms of overall, and now I'm talking about children with their parents or unaccompanied children or minors, the United States is one of the countries with the highest numbers. We have still more than 100,000 children in migration-related detention in the United States of America. So that's far more than all the other countries where we have reliable figures.
The US detains an average of 60 out of every 100,000 children, who either end up in the American justice system or immigration-related custody. Meanwhile, at least 30,000 children, mainly linked to ISIS, are held in northern Syria and in Iraq.
Armed conflict, I think the main recommendation is treat those children, even if they were recruited as child soldiers and have committed crimes, treat them primarily as victims and not as perpetrators, and try to find ways for rehabilitation and reintegration into society.
The United Nations study called the detentions illegal and inhumane, and it says the children should only be held as a measure of a last resort and for the shortest time possible.
In Indonesia, a workshop is turning industrial waste and chicken feathers into rooster decorations. Its aim is to reduce waste and generate income for the local community. Let's see their creative work.
As cockerels crow in the background, workers craft life-sized figures of chickens from factory waste such as foam and scraps of fabric. They later cover the figurines with feathers taken from chicken slaughterhouses. 35-year-old Tarjaya, who like many Indonesians only uses one name, employs 6 to 10 people from the community at his workshop.
When I saw the waste, I felt that it was a pity. The material can be used to create artwork, for example, and so we can benefit and use it too.
The rooster decorations are sold widely outside the town and even abroad through social media. The workshop produces 60 to 200 rooster figurines in a month, selling each for approximately $18.
The figurine is nice and looks so real. Secondly, this is purely made from waste material. I appreciate Terjaya because he is helping people to earn more income.
In a country that produces 175,000 tons of garbage a day, local environmentalists hope this initiative can help reduce and reuse waste.
UAE state-owned airline Emirates has placed an order for 50 Airbus A350 jets worth $16 billion. The carrier's chairman and CEO, Sheikh Ahmed Al Maktoum, said the delivery will begin from May 2023. Speaking at the Dubai Air Show, the Emirates CEO said with new inductions, the carrier will expand to new markets. Emirates serves a global network spanning over 158 destinations in 84 countries. Its fleet stands at 261 large aircraft, including 113 Airbus A380 Super Jumbos and 158 Boeing 777 planes. In November, Emirates reported its net profits nearly tripled in the half year due to a drop in operating costs and fuel prices. The US has given a new 90-day extension allowing the companies to continue trading with China's telecom giant Huawei. The move comes as US regulators are writing rules on the telecommunications firms which pose a national security risk.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said the extension allows carriers to continue serving customers in remote areas of the country. He added the U.S. will still watch technology exports to ensure innovations are not harnessed by those threatening national security. The U.S. added Huawei to an economic blacklist in May this year, citing national security concerns. The Commerce Department is also considering whether to grant individual licenses for U.S. firms to sell components to Huawei. The development comes amid discussions between the United States and China aimed at resolving their trade war.
Islamabad says China will invest $10 billion in Pakistan's oil and gas sector. Speaking in Islamabad, the planning minister Khusru Bakhtiar said Beijing will also invest $4 billion in the local steel sector. The minister said this investment will be made under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. He said a $9 billion project is also approved for a railway line from Peshawar to Karachi. Bakhtiar said the government has paved way for finalization of the Gawada master plan and preliminary design of ML1 project. Asian stock markets are trading mixed amid concerns over the outcome of the trade negotiations between the US and China. Investors are treading carefully as trading motivation dampens. Despite ongoing political unrest in Hong Kong, Hang Seng is trading nearly 1% higher. Investors were encouraged after Alibaba's nearly $13.5 billion IPO drew strong demand. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 index has shed over 0.5% after shares of index heavyweight Fanuc dropped more than 1%. The Shanghai Composite has picked nearly 0.5% in the hopes future stimulus as China's central bank cut key rates to 2.5%. Seoul's Kospi has shed nearly 0.5%. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.